Good morning, everybody. Got a interesting lesson about Christmas today. I'll probably get letters over it. I've got a problem with Christmas. Some of you say, oh no, here he goes with that old Christmas is a pagan holiday stuff again. No, that's not my problem. Christmas is not a pagan holiday. Christmas is the way we remember the birth of Jesus Christ, when God entered the human race as Christ and earned the title of Emmanuel, or God with us. Matthew 1 verse 23 says, Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us. Now, it's true that some of the Christmas traditions here in America do have pagan origins. The winter solstice, for instance, that all time they tie that to Christmas, but it never falls on December the 25th. And then there's Saturnalia, which a lot of folks claim is the origin of Christmas, was never on December 25th. Other Christmas symbols like Santa Claus, evergreen trees and candles and stuff, they have pagan roots, but they're all stuff that's been tacked on to it that have nothing to do with Christianity. Now, if there are any unbiblical things that we're doing in our Christmas celebrations, we ought to forsake them. You know, we ought to give them up. Feasting, for instance. Feasting is biblical, but gluttony is not. Drinking alcoholic beverages is not forbidden by the Bible, but getting drunk is. Giving gifts is biblical. But going into debt and spending way over your limit is not. And just to put it blunt, you're okay long as your Christmas honors God. That's the whole thing. So what? So what if some of it is pagan? Old Paul over in Acts 17, he didn't have no trouble at all using a pagan temple and an altar to a pagan god to help spread the gospel. In Acts 17:22, Then Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, Ye men of Athens, I perceive that in all things ye are too superstitious. By the way, that word superstitious means religious. For as I passed by and beheld your devotions, I found an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship, him I unto you declare. God that made the world and all things therein, seeing that he is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands. So, if Christmas started out as a pagan holiday, then we've twisted it around and made it so Christianized that if there's any pagans out there, they wouldn't want to have nothing to do with it. Christmas celebrations are so opposite to paganism that you can safely ignore them folks that say it's a pagan holiday. Besides, it's not about the holiday, it's about the condition of your heart. That's the question. What is the condition of your heart? By the way, churches have their services on days that are named after pagan gods. Christians celebrating Christmas are no more pagan than the churches who gather to worship on Sunday, the day dedicated to the sun god, or who hold a prayer service on Wednesday, named after the Norse god Woden. So the pagan origins of the names of the days of the week and stuff ain't got nothing to do with the church's services. And ancient pagan winter festivals have no real bearing on the modern Christian. All right. Now, there's three ways we can go about this. If you've got a problem with paganism and stuff, Some of you just accept whatever tradition the world throws at you without asking any questions. Now that's not too smart. Some are just the opposite. They reject everything about it and crawl into a Christian-only hole somewhere. And then some Christians will take a good hard look at them traditions and accept what they can, reject what's ungodly, and keep what's worth saving. But we've been so successful as Christians in taking over those pagan traditions that most of you don't even remember what their original meaning was. This pagan holiday stuff don't amount to hill of beans. That's what the bottom line is. We've converted them and used them for God's glory. Unless in these holidays you are actually worshiping Odin or Thor or one of those other pagan gods. Now my problem, I said I had a problem with Christmas. My problem with Christmas is the sneaky, subtle way that it sends a misleading message to unsaved folks and some Christians about who and what Jesus really is, and it's done to mislead people and keep them away from the Savior. Now you'd think, you know, that Christmas it's over 2,000 years old, and it's a birthday party for the most important person who ever lived. You'd think that the whole thing you'd be hearing every day, you'd be hearing the whole story about his death, burial, and resurrection gave men a chance to have their sin forgiven and escape the wrath of God. The reality is a little bit different. If you don't believe me, just ask a little kid these 5 questions about Christmas. Ask them, what's Christmas all about? And they'll tell you, it's when Santa Claus brings me presents. Ask them, how does he get there? He's got a flying sleigh pulled by 8 magic reindeer plus Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, out there leading him. How does he get in your house? He comes down the chimney. Well, where's all them toys come from? He's got magic elves working in a workshop up there at the North Pole. Well, what does Santa look like? Well, he's a real happy little feller, kind of fat, who wears a red suit with white fur trim. Now, ask any kids the same questions about Jesus and see what you get. Now, this is what our Christmas symbols are supposed to mean. Santa Claus is supposed to be a symbol of the spirit of giving that is supposed to remind us of God's greatest gift, His Son. The naughty and nice list that He's supposed to be keeping is supposed to remind us that we're going to face the judgment seat of Christ, although most of the time parents use it as a threat to get their kids to behave. Christmas trees, evergreen Christmas trees, are supposed to remind us of eternal life because they stay green all year. And that sleigh pulled by magic flying reindeer, I'm going to talk about them in a minute, remind us of the way Jesus is going to return to the earth. Rudolph are silly creations of men to bring a little lighthearted foolishness and fun into the celebration. And the elf toy makers are supposed to be reminders of the holy angels whose job is to minister to us who are getting saved. And Frosty the Snowman, I don't know where that comes from. I just got done answering one of my little granddaughter's questions. And she was just as serious as a stroke. She said, Papa, is Santa Claus real? I just put it this way, she knows the truth. Because I ain't going to lie to her. By the Santa Claus. Let's talk about his name. Here, Santa is an Italian girl's name that means saint. Klaus is another way of saying Nicholas. Saint Nicholas was a 4th century bishop in a place that's in Turkey now, who gave gifts. He's the patron saint of children and prostitutes. Well, there's a legend that he gave 3 very poor young girls dowries so they could get married and not have to become prostitutes to survive. In America, Santa is a jolly, fat, white-bearded man with spectacles that wears a red coat with a white fur collar and cuffs, white fur cuff trousers, a red hat with white fur, and a big black leather belt and boots. Now that picture of Santa became popular here back in the 1800s, about 1850, because a guy named Clement Clark Moore wrote a poem, The Night Before Christmas. And it got published in the New Yorker, and it's been used and maintained in the media for so long and everything that it's just become, that's how Santa looks. Well, why in the world does he wear a red suit trimmed in white fur? And why does Rudolph's nose glow? There's some really funny reasons how that stuff got put in the story. And I'll get to that in just a minute. The naughty and nice list. Some folks tell their kids that Santa is watching them and making a list of kids that's naughty and nice that he uses to pick out who gets presents and who don't. Well, and he's supposed to deliver presents on Christmas Eve with the help of all them elves that make the toys and the flying reindeer that pull his sleigh. And he's supposed to live at the North Pole, and his life sounds like ho, ho, ho. You ever heard anything so stupid in your life? Where'd all that come from? We'll get to that in a minute too. Christmas trees, well, symbolic trees, evergreen trees, they're thousands of years old. They're a lot older than Christmas. The ancient Egyptians and the Romans both used them in pagan celebrations that the Germans brought to America in the 1800s. And a long time before Christmas, plants and trees that stayed green all year had a special meaning for people in the wintertime. People today decorate their houses with pine and spruce and fir and stuff like that. The same way the ancient people hung evergreen limbs over their doors and windows. In a lot of countries it was thought that them evergreen limbs and stuff would keep the witches and the ghosts and the demons and the sickness away. Then you got the winter solstice. In the northern hemisphere, where we live, by the way, in the northern hemisphere, the shortest day of the year is December 21st or December 22nd, and it's called the winter solstice. Them old folks, back in the ancient times, they thought that the sun got sick and went south. And then when the solstice come, he got better and started coming back up north. And they celebrated the solstice because it meant that at last the sun god would begin to get well and come back. The evergreen boughs reminded them of all them green plants that was going to grow again when he got up there, and summer come back. Now, the Egyptian god Ra. Them ancient Egyptians worshipped a god called Ra, who had the head of a hawk and wore the sun as a blazing disc in his crown. At the winter solstice, when Ra started to recover from his illness, the Egyptians filled their houses with green palm leaves, and that's supposed to symbolize Ra's triumph over death. I just got 2 more, and then we'll get on with the good stuff, the funny stuff. Early Romans had a thing they called a Saturnalia. The Saturn was the god of farming and agriculture, and the Romans knew that the solstice meant that pretty soon the farms and the fruit trees and stuff would be green and fruitful again. So to mark that occasion, they decorated their homes and their temples with evergreens. In northern Europe, them Druids, the priests of the ancient Celts, also decorated their temples with evergreens as a symbol of everlasting life. The Vikings in Scandinavia thought that them evergreens were a special plant of the sun god Balder. Balderdash. Our Christmas tree started in Germany. In the 16th century, when we was settling the country here, the devout German Christians brought decorated trees into their houses, and some built Christmas pyramids out of wood and decorated them and stuff with evergreens and candles. Even Martin Luther, that 16th century Protestant reformer, was the first one that added Christmas trees, candles to a Christmas tree. Most Americans that weren't of German descent thought that the Christmas trees was pagan till after the Civil War. The first Christmas tree that was put on public display was around 1830 in Pennsylvania by the German settlers up there. But they've been doing it in their houses for ever since the 1600s. The Puritans tried to stop people from using Christmas trees. Christmas was sacred to them Puritans. William Bradford wrote that he had tried to stamp out the pagan mockery of Christmas by punishing frivolity. Well, Oliver Cromwell preached against the heathen tradition of Christmas carols, decorated trees, and any joyful celebration that desecrated that sacred event. In 1659, the General Court of Massachusetts enacted a law making any observance of December 25th other than a church service a crime. People got fined for hanging decorations, and that continued all the way up until the 1850s when there's finally enough German immigrants up there to weaken the influence of the Puritans. And then over in 1846, Queen Victoria put one on the public display over there, and they just caught on real quick. High society wanted, everybody in high society wanted one of them. Ornaments and lights in the early 20th century, they got to where they could actually put lights and bright colored decorations and stuff on them trees, and it just exploded. It got established as an American tradition. Now I'm going to get something that you probably, if you do know it, well, it's something that most people don't have a clue about. Why does Santa look the way he does? What about the flying reindeer? And why does Rudolph's nose glow? Who thought that up? You might be surprised to find out where that come from. Well, Santa's flying reindeer is supposed to pull his sleigh all over the world in one night, putting presents under every good kid's tree. Now, the rest of the story is that Santa and his flying reindeer and the way he looks and everything is based on Russian witch doctors. Santa looks like a Russian witch doctor, and they're magic psychedelic mushrooms, Amanita muscaria. They cause hallucinations if you eat them, and they figured them hallucinations would help you see the spirit world. They look something like this right here. Notice the colors. Red and white. Beautiful red and white color. Now, the Russian legend, and I want coming down the chimney, I got that too. The Russian legend of Santa comes from witch doctors in Siberia who dropped into the people that lived there. They'd drop into their teepee-like homes with a bag full of these mushrooms, dried mushrooms, as presents in late December. Until a couple of hundred years ago, these Siberian witch doctors that still followed the old traditions, they'd go out and they'd gather up a bag full of these holy mushrooms, they'd dry them, and then they'd give them out as gifts. And since snow in Siberia was usually blocking the doors. It was up high enough to block all the doors. Those folks that lived there put an opening in the roof that people used to get in and out of their house. That's how the chimney story got started. And like I said, the Amanita muscaria mushroom is deep red and it's got white flecks on it. What a coincidence. It's just the start of the connection between magic mushrooms and the symbols of Christmas. Brightly wrapped presents under the tree. There's a book wrote by James Arthur that says, why do people bring pine trees into their houses and put brightly colored red and white packages under the trees as gifts to show their love for each other? It's because underneath them pine trees is where that mushroom grows wild. Now, flying reindeer. Reindeer in Siberia love to eat magic mushrooms. The people that live up there do too. The Siberian tribesmen that ate them mushrooms probably had hallucinations that their reindeer was flying. Then they had to fly up there and get them. Anyway, the witch doctors, they had a tradition of dressing up in bright red suits with white spots like this so that they'd look like one of them mushrooms. And then in 1823, that Clement Clark Moore wrote his book, A Visit from St. Nicholas, that he got the idea for the way Santa Claus looked from the Russian witch doctor tradition of wearing a red suit with white trim. Then those traditions and Russian traditions got combined with that Turkish legend of St. Nicholas and, oh, by the way, Santa's sleigh and his reindeer. Y'all know, everybody knows the name of their reindeer. The Norse god Thor, his name's Donner. They threw that in there too. Donner flew in a chariot that was drawn by 2 flying goats, which have been replaced with Santa's reindeer. Then you got Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Rudolph's red glowing nose also comes from that magic mushroom story. His nose looks exactly like a red mushroom. He said it's amazing that a reindeer with a red mushroom nose is in front leading all the others. Has anybody, if you've made it this far in this video, have you noticed that I ain't mentioned Jesus yet? Has anybody noticed that? You probably started to suspect this lesson ain't really about Christmas trees. It's about learning the difference between the real Jesus and the devil's very carefully crafted, perfectly beautiful fakes. Christ, Jesus Christ, is not in the winter solstice party that a pope renamed Christmas. Now I always draw up in a knot every time I hear somebody saying, keep Christ in Christmas. They probably think that's the proper thing to do, but Christ is nowhere to be found in that old recycled pagan winter festival. He's just not there. Jesus isn't in the world's Christmas holiday. He's in the heart of true believers. And none of the symbols of Christmas that I've talked about so far point to Christ. None of them. They're all creations of Satan. They're very subtle distractions. That's harmless, don't worry about it. They're just subtle, very subtle distractions that have been carefully designed to draw people away, hide Jesus, and keep them from ever knowing the truth about Him or giving Him any of the glory, honor, and credit that's due to Him, because the world hates Jesus. But that's what they're supposed to do. The world hates Jesus and everything associated with Him. John 15 verse 18 says, if the world hate you, ye know that it hated me before it hated you. If ye were of the world would love his own. But because ye are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. But there are a few pretty good lessons that we can get in a Christmas tree. We can wring some good stuff out of it. Satan did a good job slipping Christmas trees into the Christmas mix. He's, like I said, he's real subtle and he's real clever and he knows human nature real good. But when you take a closer look at the Christmas tree tradition, there's a couple of things you can find in there that can help you make sense of some common problems that churches and Christians has got to deal with. The church has got a problem with tares. I'll just go ahead and read Matthew 13:24. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in the field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst thou not sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servants said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. If you ever find a perfect church, run like the devil is after you, because he is. A church that doesn't have any problems, no splits, no gossips, no hypocrites, no backbiters, complainers, or whiners. If you find one like that, that's a false, dead church where everybody marches in lockstep in complete agreement with each other. They don't tolerate problems or disagreements of any kind. I'm sure most of you are too young to remember that old movie, The Stepford Wives. Nobody causes problems. They're all like them Stepford Wives. According to Matthew 13, if you find a church like that, it's not a real church. The way you can tell a church is real if it's got tares in it. Satan don't waste no time of planting tares in a church that's already dead. He don't waste his time. Devil's a busy man. He won't waste what little time he has left to planting tares in a church that's dead and totally ineffective. So who or what are these tares? Well, a church I went to a couple of years ago had folks in there that went to an awful lot of trouble putting on a show of how holier than thou they were, how righteous they was. They always had this fake smile pasted on their face and went around quoting random scripture all the time that didn't really apply to nothing. Now what they're doing is trying to hide how dead they really was inside. They're trying to convince everybody that they were fully mature, fruit-bearing Christians, but they was black holes of spiritual need. They sucked the spiritual life out of anybody that got too close to them. They were exactly like a Christmas tree. A Christmas tree presents this perfect picture of beautiful spirituality with the fruit and the good works and all that stuff. But it's a perfect picture of spiritual bankruptcy. I hope them folks was able to find Jesus and let him bring them to life before it's too late. Now, real Christians, they have doubts. Most Christians get confused. Have you ever wondered, am I doing all this right? Am I even really saved? Well, if you're wondering that, you're probably just fine. One way you can be sure whether or not you're saved is to look at your fruit. All right? Matthew 7:16. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns, or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore, by their fruits ye shall know them. You know, over in Galatians 5:22, it tells you what kind of fruit you're supposed to be producing. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, and faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And I'm sure somebody's sitting there saying, what if I don't have any fruit? Where's my fruit? Why can't I see any fruit most of the time? Why do I feel so unchristian most of the week? How come all I can see is the works of the flesh? I see plenty of the works of the flesh. Now the works, Galatians 5:19, now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like. Well, sometimes it makes me feel like a big phony, a fake. I'm just pretending to be a Christian and hoping nobody can see all that wickedness festering around inside of me. And sometimes on Sunday mornings, I feel like a Christmas tree. I get on my church costume and I go down there with this smile. I even take a bath. And I come and put on a show being a Christian, and I feel just feel dead as a wedge inside. But I'm going to compare something. If you feel that way, you're probably a real living fruit tree to a Christmas tree, and see if it'll help you figure out which one you are, okay? A Christmas tree, you start a Christmas tree out by cutting down and killing a living tree, or just buying a fake plastic one. A living fruit tree is started by planting a living seed in the earth, or grafting a living branch onto a living tree in faith and hope of some fruit when it gets mature enough. A Christmas tree shows up overnight. It shows up fully mature, bearing beautiful, gorgeous, colorful fruit and jewels and tinsels and all this stuff overnight. Just boom, it happens. Us living fruit trees, we grow real slow. We're real tender and easy to kill the first few years after you plant it, and we sure don't produce no fruit. I know it takes 7 years for an apple tree to produce fruit. So you can't go by that. A Christmas tree has got all these beautiful looking fake fruit made out of glass, hung on them for decoration. But if you try to eat one of them fake fruits, it'll break, shatter in your mouth, and it'll cut you all to pieces. And there's no food in it at all, nothing. A living fruit tree, whenever the time is right, when the time is right, they'll bear sweet, delicious, life-sustaining fruit after they've matured long enough. Like I said, an apple tree usually takes 7 years before it produces an apple. Now then, that Christmas tree is completely dead. Completely dead. There's no life whatsoever in it. But they look more alive than a living tree. You look over there this time of year, go out in the orchard somewhere and look at an apple tree right now. What do you see? They're very much alive, but you'd never know it to look at them. They look completely dead this time of year. They look completely dead about half a year, as a matter of fact. Christmas trees are the most beautiful when the living trees seem the most dead. Fruit trees are only beautiful when they are growing, when they are blooming, and when they are bearing fruit. Christmas trees are made from plastic, or from trees that stay green all year. Don't matter about the weather. Apple trees, pear tree, peach tree, you let a little frost hit them and see what happens. Lose every one of their leaves. Every one of the leaves fall off of them when they get the little frost on them. A Christmas tree is going to end up in the garbage dump after a short holiday season. A real tree is destined to bear life-sustaining fruit and multiply for many, many years. Now, a Christmas tree, another thing, a Christmas tree is usually completely free of bugs and aphids and worms and stuff like that. The sores on them, diseases and decay. Christmas tree's free of all that stuff. It ain't got none of that stuff. A living fruit tree is constantly under attack. It's got to be protected from insects. It's got to be protected from sores, diseases, and decay by constant attention from a gardener, the master gardener. And these Christmas trees, they got this wonderful, fresh, clean, woodsy smell year-round. A living fruit tree just smell good when they're blooming. Most of them smell kind of like a cross between dirt and mildew most of the time. So, what kind of ornaments are hanging on your tree? The devil says you got to hang a bunch of empty decorations that'll made out of glass that'll cut you. Now that you're a Christian, here's what you got to do. And this is some of them fake fruit, okay? If you're a Christian, the devil says you got to quit cussing. Well, at least where church people can hear you. You got to quit drinking, at least where the other church folks can see you. You got to quit fooling around with other men's wives, where the church people might catch you. Got to quit hanging out with sinners, where the church people can see you. No dancing, no laughing, no having fun, or acting silly. You got to be the angel on the treetop. You got to be in church every time them doors is open, so the church people can see how much holier you are than they are. Even when you ain't feeling it, when you feel like a poor old apple tree out there in the middle of nowhere, all the leaves gone, standing there looking dead as a wedge, and it's cold, and you're miserable, even when you're not feeling it. Don't let them Christmas tree Christians make you feel bad. Be completely yourself. Be yourself. Be completely comfortable being yourself. You are God's workmanship. It cost God an awful lot to buy you the freedom to be yourself. So, don't be no Christmas tree Christian. You can do better than that. Thank y'all. I'll see you next week. I'm going to try to talk a little bit about what to expect out of everything that's going on out there. What the Bible says you can expect. You might like it, you might not, but it's God's will. I'll be talking about that next week. I'll see you then.